Good afternoon and welcome to this year's very first RegTech webinar. By way of introduction, my name is Zintle Novazi and I will be your host for today. First of all, let me just start by thanking Capital Markets Africa for bringing this event to you today. Today is really an opportunity for you to engage with the respective speakers. Please do feel free to engage with our panelists. We are continuously monitoring the chat box on your left side. So make this session as engaging as possible and give us any comments, any questions that you have. And of course, to our partners for today's event, because without them, this event would have not been possible. So thank you to Moody's Analytics, First Step, MEA, as well as MemberCheck and Cube for being our partners for today's event. Without wasting any time, I would like to thank you guys for taking the time to be with us today. I really think that you will value the content that will be presented to you. Without further ado, I'd like to present our first speaker who will be giving a presentation on AI and ML in RegTech. Dr. Ying Lu is the head of product at Cube. So Ying is the head of product and Cube is a marketing leading RegTech that transforms regulatory data into regulatory intelligence. RegBrain is Cube's data learning engine, and it is powered by advanced ML and NLP techniques, which are focused on machine understanding. Its core capabilities encompass everything from recommendation systems to the prediction of related trends. So please look forward to this talk. There's so much that you're going to learn from her. And of course, keep commenting. We will be looking out for your comments and any questions directed to Dr. Ying. Over to you, Dr. Ying.
Thank you so much for the intro, Zincle, and thank you to Capital Markets Africa for organizing this event. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Let me just share my screen as I've got some visuals to accompany my narrative. Right, so the focus of my talk is AI and RegTech, and critically, how human and machine intelligence are transforming compliance as we know it today. To bring out the human in me, I'd like to actually start with a song. Now, the lyrics are original, and the melody is inspired by The Police. So, here goes nothing. Every risk you take and every reg you break, from the SEC to the RBZ, RegTech can help reduce. Oh, can't you see the complexity, the volume and pace of regulatory change? Every risk you take and every rule you break, there's too much at stake for the market's sake. AI is here for you. Right, have I ruined The Police for everyone? Needless to say, I think Sting is going to kill me, and I'm very grateful that we are separated by a massive pond, and also that this is a virtual webinar as opposed to a physical one. Right, so on a more serious note, everyone, all right, let's face it. Ever since the 2008 global financial crash, the volume, velocity, and complexity of regulatory change have exploded. Now, to give you a taste of the volume and velocity of reg change, I'd like to focus on the past 6 months only, March to August of this year, and to keep things simple and relevant for you, let's just take a look at regulations from African countries. Okay, so volume. So here we see the main regulators from Africa that are relevant to financial firms. It's a bubble diagram. The size of the bubble is proportionate to the volume of regulatory publications coming from the regulator. So Johannesburg Stock Exchange clearly dominates with almost 3,000 publications over the 6-month period. Now, if you look at some of the other ones, Lusaka Stock Exchange, Casablanca Stock Exchange, Bank of Ghana, the government of South Africa, Central Bank of Kenya, for example, all these added up over 1,000, all of this in just 6 months from just one region of the globe. Now, velocity, okay. Looking at this volume over time, we can see that every single day, we have dozens upon dozens, in some cases hundreds of regulatory updates. And this is, again, on a daily basis. How can we keep up with this, right? So the bottom line is, if you want to keep up with regulatory change, never mind stay ahead of it, AI-powered RegTech solutions are no longer an option, right? They are a necessity, and they're soon going to become table stakes. Increasing headcount and budget is not the solution anymore. I'd like to quote Ruth Vonhofer, the former global head of regulatory market innovation strategy at Citi here. And she said, tech and regulation must go hand in hand. It is no longer possible to have humans manage regulatory change. Of course, if financial firms don't keep up with this pace of regulatory change, there is a cost, and that's both financial and reputational. $214 billion of fines have been issued to the top 10 global banks since 2008. And this is not going to decrease. Here you can see just a selection of some more recent fines issued over the past few years. It gets worse, though. So Brexit, climate change, COVID, these have all made reg change even more complex, right? And it's only going to get worse. We live in an era of rapidly evolving technologies, a world becoming more and more and more connected by the minute, by the second. And all of these emerging technologies will have to be regulated. IoT, crypto, blockchain, who knows what's coming next. But enough with the negativity. You are all well aware of the cost of non-compliance. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here today. So let me now say something positive. Each and every one of you has a unique market and infrastructural advantage for RegTech. Unlike banks in Europe and the US, you are not encumbered by legacy architecture and systems. In fact, you've been very good at adopting new technology quite early. So real-time banking in South Africa happened in the 90s. It took Europe a decade further to get there. Kenya has had mobile payments since the late 90s, and Europe began with that 15 years later, And what's more, according to McKinsey, African banking is growing at the second fastest rate worldwide. By next year, half the adult population in Africa is going to be on banking services. And the Africa Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is the largest trade deal in the world since the WTO and has enabled an Africa-wide banking app, among many other financial innovations. So with all of this context in mind, let's talk about how AI is being used in RegTech right now. I'd like to begin first with some important definitions for context-setting purposes. So let's start off with RegTech. What is RegTech, and how does it relate to fintech? RegTech is simply put the use of technology to help regulated firms understand and meet their compliance obligations. Now, RegTech is not really a subset of fintech, and that's for two reasons. The first reason is that fintechs have an association with disruptive innovation. They're challenging business models through the use of tech to better serve customers and markets. RegTechs may be disruptive, but they're better framed as enablers of financial firms, and this ranges from the challenger banks through to the well-established tier ones. Second reason is that sectors beyond finance benefit from RegTech as well. For example, healthcare, pharma, gambling, anything that has a high amount of regulation. Now, second definition, the tech in RegTech is increasingly being driven by AI, which has academic origins in the 1950s, although back then, compute wasn't so great. Now, at a very high level, AI is intelligence demonstrated by machines, as opposed to the natural intelligence from humans. The key thing is, though, that machines are trained by and learn from humans. We can't easily separate the two. Now, to fully illustrate this, let's take a more visual look at AI. So here is the 10,000-foot view of an AI system. Very simply put, three main components, right? Data, which influences the model, goes into the model, and then what comes out, results. And these could be predictions, recommendations, classifications, translations. The world's your oyster, right? And there's a feedback loop for continuous improvement of this system. But the key thing here is the quality of the results is conditioned by two things. So the data and the modeling techniques. And there has been an overemphasis in the media and public discourse on the model, the algorithm side of things in recent years, given, of course, significant improvements, advances that have happened in this time. More on that in a second. The key thing, though, data, we haven't focused as much on that, I think, in recent years. And who determines and generates the data? We do, right? Who biases the data? We do. So this is the message I want you to keep in mind for the rest of this talk. We cannot take the human out of AI. So AI, in my view, it's a structured version of human intelligence, human judgment, design, curation. Let's not view humans and machines as completely different things, yeah? Okay, definitions done. Let's move on to the key AI use cases in RegTech as it currently stands. Everything from treating customers fairly, right? Ensuring that, and also making the complex calculations possible for things like capital adequacy. Now, there's been a recent analysis made of over 1,200 different RegTech products, and that has revealed 11 major categories they fall into. I'll go over a few of them right now. So the first category of note is regulatory and compliance management. Now, to me, this is top of the funnel, right? Because you first have to understand what regulations are applicable to your firm and what rules they contain, right? So, and we saw earlier, the volume and the velocity, immense. And there's so many domains to keep track of, so many jurisdictions if you're global, right? Over 100, right? And the rules are always changing. So that is definitely one massive area of RegTech. Moving on down this funnel, as it were, we have particular verticals like fin crime. Very, very, very important. So we're using AI here to help detect AML, fraud activity. It's transaction surveillance or monitoring, helping with counterterrorism financing. Another vertical that's very important, of course, cybersecurity, identity, and privacy. So again, AI in this case to help detect cybersecurity risk and resolve data protection and privacy issues. And as every bank becomes more and more digitized, the risk of data breaches goes through the roof, right? Tremendous problem. Then we have regulatory risk analytics and calculations. These are quite complex calculations, hence the need for the machine help and simulations. Purposes like pricing, stress testing, capital allocation to assess the exposures, to anticipate the future threats, all for operational resilience purposes. A couple more. Market integrity and transparency, MIT, not to be confused with that very famous university in Massachusetts. And this is RegTech here is helping us comply with requirements surrounding the fairness, efficiency, and transparency of financial markets, critical for the fabric of the global economy. And then finally, for now, regulatory reporting. I like this one. The new regulations coming in require more and more data. And so RegTech can help with storing this data and meeting the regulators' increasingly complex reporting needs. Yeah? Okay. So let's take a step back again and to bring everything together at a high level. Think about AI and RegTech as having this main objective. It's to help compliance, legal, and risk experts focus on what they do best. Critical thinking, creativity, right? anything involving nuance, edge cases. So for example, determining which internal policies and controls should change and how in response to an update in regulation. Repetitive tasks can and should be outsourced to the machine. So for example, checking hundreds of these regulator websites and feeds for updates every day or week, pasting the updates into a spreadsheet, extracting rules from them, new spreadsheet, right? Human capital and talent are far, far, far too valuable to be invested in repetitive, low-level tasks. That's the bottom line. So let me end this section with an analogy. Straight through processing, or STP. Now, many of you are already familiar with this in the context of banking transactions. STP has revolutionized the accounting function in finance, right? So through STP, payment and trade processing, fully automatic, end-to-end, transactions happen in seconds at extremely low error rates. Now, traditional payment methods from a few decades ago required phone calls, email, fax, both sender and recipient ends, front and back office, could take days to complete and were prone to error. So they were very expensive in terms of time, money, and emotions. Now, in a similar way, AI-powered RegTech is revolutionizing the compliance, risk, legal, and cyber functions in finance. Responses to reg change can be facilitated without too much manual intervention from end to end. I want you to also close your eyes, right? Close your eyes and imagine this. Horizon scanning for relevant, applicable regulations, extracting rules from them, assessing the risk of the rules, mapping these rules into internal processes, policies, controls, all this happening for the most part automatically. No need for multiple email threads or the updating of multiple Excel spreadsheets that will be out of date next week. Humans only brought in to look at the exceptions. All right. This, ladies and gents, is the driverless car of compliance. And I trust I don't have to spell out the benefits because Elon, one of the most famous South Africans out there today, already has. He has done the evangelism on my behalf, right? Okay. So now that we've taken a look at the key use cases of AI in RegTech and the far future at a very high level, this driverless car, okay, of compliance, let's take a look at where AI is going in the nearer future when it comes to compliance. Let's take a look at the rapid technological advancements that have occurred over the past few years and what they mean for you and your business. And so for this exercise, I'm going to focus on this top of the funnel category of RegTech, that is to say, regulatory and compliance management, as opposed to a particular domain vertical like FinCrime or tax, given time constraints. So up until now, machine learning and natural language processing techniques have been used for machine reading, right? That is to say, the collection, organization, classification, and translation of regulatory text in near real time. And they've also been used to extract those obligations, those rules from such text. But very soon, machine reading of regulatory text is going to reach a whole new level. Machine understanding, yeah? RegTechs will not only know that certain regulations are focused on certain topics like climate change risk, derivatives, but also how the topics are evolving in certain jurisdictions over time. And regulations, along with the rules they contain, will be related to each other in a way that transcends the explicit in-text references. RegTechs will also begin to understand which regulations have the most attention from regulators and the regulated. And all of this will enable predictions to be made about regulatory change. So imagine this. Imagine not only being able to stay on top of regulatory change, but also anticipating future regulation before it even arrives. And this is proactivity at its finest. Three key factors, I believe, have created this inflection point in RegTech AI. The first one is data availability and quality. Over the past decade or so, native E versions of many regulations have been produced and enriched. And this allows for regulatory text and metadata to be structured at scale and consumed at scale by machines. Second factor is market readiness and subsequent product maturity in RegTech. So in recent years, the hesitancy around AI-based solutions, regulatory management, has begun to evolve really into tremendous appetite for more intelligent RegTech tools. And this appetite, in turn, is reflected in the maturity of RegTech software into multifunctional, highly customizable, and API-connected platforms. The best factor, I say for last, the third factor, and that is the tech itself, right? The algorithms. And I broadly call this subset of AI semantic AI. This is very relevant to RegTech. And the stage for semantic AI has been set. Vast volumes of this regulatory and user data intersecting in user-in-the-loop systems in RegTech software, right? Semantic AI comes in and it leverages both this data and, very critically, these revolutionary advances in deep learning models, transformer-based models, as we call it, in recent years. Now, let's illustrate this revolution with an analogy, okay? So, just over a decade ago, there was a breakthrough in computer vision, as many of you know, right? The subset of AI that allows machines to see like humans. And this breakthrough was driven by ImageNet. It's a massive database, over 14 million images that have been hand annotated to indicate which objects they contained, over 20,000 categories in this data set. So Fei-Fei Li, the creator of ImageNet, said, we're going to map out the entire world of objects, and that they did. So we are now reaching the equivalent moment in regulatory text, a RegNet moment. And this is, again, the collision of these large-scale, sophisticated language models, deep learning models, with the well-defined data sets of regulatory text enriched by human annotations. The text, by the way, is more structured and cohesive than most free-form text on the web, like blogs and tweets. So achieving some form of semantic understanding is entirely feasible in this subset of words and language. Now, these large-scale deep learning transformer-based language models, right, they, at the forefront of AI advances today, were introduced in 2017. You know, Facebook and Google and many others all involved in this. The key thing for you to keep in mind is that these models understand context. They know that a key term in one document is equivalent to a key term in another document, even if these key terms are not clear synonyms. So, for example, Memorandum of Association in the UK Companies Act 1948, the machine would know that this is the same thing as Articles of Incorporation in Chapter 16 of the Wyoming, that's a US state, of course, Business Corporation Act, Article 1, right? And how does it know? Well, apart from the human annotations, the syntax and the surrounding words alone of those keywords, right? So it's increasingly similar to a human brain. We have gone way beyond keyword matching, my friends. Now, the overall effect of RegNet will begin to be felt next year, and it's this. As machines reach that critical mass of regulatory knowledge learned from us, we will begin to learn from the machines. We as legal, risk, compliance experts will rely a bit more on machines to inform, but not replace, never replace, our understanding of regulation. And there's more. If we are fully on top of the regs, we can influence the regulations themselves, right? RegTechs kind of sit in the middle here. They can facilitate the set of feedback loops between the regulated entities in finance, for example, and the regulator. So basically, you can show the regulators that the rules they create aren't going to work the way they think they will, aren't clear, and will have X, Y, Z unexpected impacts on your business and thus on the global economy. And this will, in the medium long term, help regulators build better, clearer, more structured, more consistent regulations across time and space. Now, second related note here is that RegTechs enable more collaboration between you and your peers. So knowledge sharing is going to be possible, learning from other banks that have faced similar compliance frustrations and challenges to you. You know, we're all in this together, right, for the sake of the global economy. So it's not just the driverless car of compliance that RegTech AI enables. It is also a global paradigm shift in how regulation operates. So to conclude, we're reaching this critical inflection point in RegTech AI, right? Now let's return to the title and the beginning of this talk. And I hope you can now see how humans and machines together can hold hands and harness our collective intelligence to transform the way that we do compliance, and indeed, even the way we think about compliance and the way that we regulate ultimately. Let's return to the police. All right, let's end with a bit more humanity, but this time with the collective we voice, right? Every risk we take and every rule we break to prevent headache and avoid mistake, we have to use AI. All right. Thank you very much for listening, for tolerating the horrible singing there. And thank you very much for being here today. It's been a pleasure. Let's stay in touch. Thank you.
Dr. Ying, before you exit, we actually have a question from one of the members of the audience.
Oh, okay.
Let me just quickly go back to the question.
Sure.
Yes. So it is, how do you see the indecency of regulators in policy implementation and the capability from perspective of talent?
Wow, that is a very deep question. I'm not fully sure I understand it, but I can try to answer from my initial interpretation of this. So I think, yeah, one of the frustrations is indeed the fact that the actual enforcement of regulation, it's hard to know how to comply sometimes, right? And the enforcement patterns are not always consistent, which is why I was saying that we need to teach these regulators how to regulate. It's no one's fault, by the way. These concepts, the technologies are so fast evolving, like crypto, look at environmental governance. Like it's impossible to be perfect here. But I think this is where RegTech can play that central role of kind of bringing together the data, and from both sides, the regulator data and the regulated data. The talent perspective is super interesting. I think that in a way, and this is beginning to happen, the regulators as a whole, I think they are investing in internal AI resources. And the key thing is to be able to regulate these fast-moving technologies, you do need, of course, talent on the regulator side who understand it. This is definitely happening. It can certainly be increased, however. The question remains, how do we prevent the talent from all going to the big techs like Google, Amazon, Facebook, right? But it's a very important point that the talent requirement on all sides, RegTechs, at the regulators themselves, and of course at the banks, that is a critical issue I see today.
Yeah, and then just one quick question, and then we have to take a break. The last question from Tim BC, if you can briefly answer that in about 30 seconds. So she's basically confirming that AI does not replace human intelligence.
Oh, no. And look, it's just, this is too complex. We're not looking at images here. Images, you can reduce that to a set of numbers that the machine understands. With human text, there's so much nuance to it. The same word means different things in a year's time. We absolutely could never fully remove the human. It's all about how can we strike that partnership with the machine, the partnership where we collaborate and we focus the human on the critical thinking, the creative stuff that lawyers are known for, right? We can't have people cutting and pasting into spreadsheets. But then, of course, once the machine learns enough, as I was saying at the end, we will begin to learn trends and patterns about, even our own behavior, and of course, trends and patterns in the regulations themselves. So it's an interesting partnership, ever evolving. But yeah, the human is at the core of it.
Thank you so much for that. So we will be taking a break. I guess this is an opportunity for you to go network with Anyone in the other rooms? Yeah, join us shortly.